Hey everybody, Windrake Hex here, doing a live draft commentary with the hope of helping new-ish players, as well as talking about archetypes and building a deck as we go, giving some contextual knowledge to the drafting process, hopefully. I certainly can be wrong, and my opinions are my opinions, but hopefully we'll be able to disseminate some general draft principles. Um, our rare slot is actually a legendary, and it's Scales of Twilight. It's a very strong card. Getting the two constants is cool. Being able to kill stuff when you're ahead is really cool. It's not like an auto slam, though it's worth a couple bucks. And if we can go Goot, it's very strong. We are passing up some pretty decent cards. Um, Templar of Lumos is very good. Thought Collector is very good. And I really like this card in Candles, but um, it is pack one. We don't know it's open. It's pick one, pack one. This card can be very oppressive, and it's probably worth like a tick or two. So, that being said, I'm kind of open to be a little flexible. Um, so, Deathless Infiltrator is a very strong card. It synergizes kind of with itself, but you can also give it different socketable abilities. But most of the time, you're going to be Fate Weaving this guy. But there's a lot of ways to Fate Weave, and this card just gets nuts. Um, it's a really hard card to pass. Some honorary mentions would be like the Mill card, which is pretty decent. 3/3 unblockable for 4 is pretty good alone. Milling cards is good, and Mill. We got some, kind of slow removal, sometimes fast. And then Firepower, which I really like a lot, though kind of avoid Ruby a little bit. This is pack 2, so we don't really have any signals. If I knew where I was at, I'd probably just take Firepower, but I'm going to take the Infiltrator because it's probably the second best card. I think Firepower is the best card, just straight up removal. This is an interesting pack. So if we want to go Constant Matters, I think a Runic Decay is really good to have. It is itself a constant. And I mean for a couple turns, and its removal. This card is just a beast. I really like this card a lot, and it just gets bigger incidentally, even if you're not in mill. In mill, it's a incredibly powerful card. Um, I like this card because it's value. It's a 3 power, 3 cost troop, single threshold, and you get a constant. It's probably going to be my pick here just because it's in diamond. It doesn't necessarily synergize with Fate Weave, but you don't really need it to. It's just strong enough on its own. Runic Decay. Neither one of these cards are quite strong enough to jump into Blood necessarily. So, though this is probably we're picking probably the third best card in the pack, which is okay. So this is a really late. Well, not really late. This is a strong signal for that Ruby's open with Flame Lick. I'm more than happy just to go with an aggressive, troop-based strategy that gains value kind of slowly instead of doing huge things like transform or whatever. Mainly because for consistency's sake, like we want to have a deck that's going to have a decent matchup against every deck we play. When you get into Goot and Mill and stuff like that, you do lose out on consistency. The blood's pretty. We've seen some really good blood too, so we may actually just end up with a blood-based deck when all is said and done. But I'm going to take this flame. I mean, being able to do 3 damage for 3, and gain a troop that probably is going to synergize with the deck we end up in. It's pretty awesome. So we're seeing some transform cards. Go nuts. We could also just switch to transform though. Kind of does negate some of our. I don't think some of our options. I don't think diamond's particularly open. So we really wanted to pick like a really good Ruby card here just to kind of solidify something. I would love to go to play a Faruko based deck. Um, though I don't know if jumping into wild for a Blightseed Fiddler is really what we want to do. Probably just take the Ebonhorn because it does kind of, it's a powerful card on its own. Yikes. Okay, so transform's totally open. Uh, a party fungi this late is a pretty huge signal. It does kind of negate our first 5 picks. We could also just grab a Rune Blast and just be like, we're gonna swoop up on these super late Ruby cards, and we'll probably end up in Diamond Candle thing, but we're not really too sad. I mean, this is another solid Diamond card, so maybe we do just end up in Diamond. I'm gonna take the removal here, even though this tapper is quite good, and if we are in a Diamond Ruby, we're probably gonna have plenty of elementals. So yeah, we're a little frustrating. We could be transformed. We would have had like 2 of these guys and a party fungi, and we've seen some Chrysalis pass, so maybe that was the play. I haven't seen a whole lot of wild, just good stuff. So I don't know. I'd probably have no problem making that deck. I do. I mean, we didn't have a strong reason to get into that deck. Party fungi would be a pretty good reason, but we're already 6, packs in, and this certainly isn't a bad grip. All right. I like this guy because of his socketed power. If we knew that we were, oh god, it's so open, isn't it? Okay. So here's the problem with switching this late, is that the person to our left, presumably, I know it's not like pods anymore, is going to be getting some pretty crazy signals. So I'm thinking we may do some like super. We're going to start hedging to potentially being in the transform deck, because that card wheeled, which is pretty insane. And that means that we have like another 2 1/4 packs just to have transform all to ourselves, presumably. Now, if we are wrong, or if somebody is thinking the same thing we are and cuts us, we're in really bad shape. So that's kind of why switching late can really blow up in your face. I mean, we're still getting fine cards, We could easily splash the Twilight if we get it in this deck, too. So I like this because it's evasive. We have a pretty decent core of diamond cards. I very much don't think that diamonds we're the only diamond drafter, but we got a decent core, and Ruby can be pretty open as we go on. So firepower wheeling is a big deal. It means that Ruby is kind of the place to be. I don't think this card really is too hard to analyze. I mean, it deals with a bunch of stuff, and it's 4 power. Ruby doesn't have a just deal with any card. It has Rune Blast, but it's typically aggressive, so the tension is in the early game anyway. Yeah, so take a firepower, be pretty happy. Okay, so I feel like somebody else picked up Transform, because we would have saw some of those Transform cards. And next pack we would have been totally cut. So it was probably too late to jump in the party fungi, though it was a really, really enticing signal. So we could help our fixing or our consistency on our resources, or we can grab one that allows us to splash. There are some decent uncommons in Blood Ruby that we may want to splash. I love this card quite a bit. It's a very powerful turn 3 play. It's a great blocker. It's a great attacker. And we're going to slam it in our deck here. We're still seeing Belligerent Badgers, but that's not necessarily a signal. It's not really a card that you want like 4 of in your transform deck. It just gains incidental value, and it's like resource efficient, because you're probably going to be transforming stuff. So basically we're building. So the objective of pack 1 is to pretty much pick a shard, see what's open. You need a base knowledge of like the power level of cards to be able to interpret signals, but generally if removal's floating around, I'm gonna get this for the sideboard. If removal's floating around late would be like pack or pick 5 or 6, 7, stuff like that, or if it wheels, especially if it wheels, and you could, like good removal. You could safely say that that shard's probably it's not heavily drafted. Things can change, and they do change frequently, but uh, you're looking for indicators that the shard that you're in is open. If not, you want to identify if you're being cut like as fast as possible. And being cut just basically means you're competing with other people at the table for your archetype or your shard combo or whatever. Because basically, even the worst archetype, if you can get all the cards for it, it's great because you're going to have a more consistent, powerful deck than the best archetype that was split amongst like 3 people. Something to note: this one didn't wheel last pack, so I don't know. Someone could have hated it, but I don't know. So anyway, we really like this card basically because we want to spam a board of candles, and this allows us to either buff our candles twice in increments of +1/+1, or create 2 more candles at quick speed. So oftentimes this can just totally get your opponent when they're attacking. I think should probably just take the Frost Blast, but we're gonna have enough access to removal in Ruby, I think, that I really don't want to miss an opportunity to take a synergistic card because we're gonna want to be on the aggressive side. I think that the aggressive candles tends to perform better than the late game, just because there's other decks doing more powerful things in the late game. So we're just gonna go ahead and ignore that. Ignore that. Also, kind of say goodbye to Scales of Twilight. It's generally going to be way too slow. We're probably not playing Constants. This card isn't quite strong enough for a splash, especially because we're probably not going to have a lot of Gladiator. This card's pretty good on its own. It's a solid 2-drop. We are going to be playing more actions than your average Gladiator deck because we're in Candles. So that's one reason to go ahead and pick up this guy. I think we just want to stay with removal, though, mainly because this is about as good as it gets for Ruby, and there's not going to be too many games where we don't want this card. Fate Weave, really solid wild card. Anyway, this card's great. It's a 2/1 for 2. It stays aggressive. It's evasive, so it's going to do some damage. It's really fragile, but if you do, it's a 2-drop in the late game that even if it didn't have flying, we'd be happy to have it because we can illuminate. So it's slow, but it doesn't. The cost of playing this card is just playing a 2/1 flyer for 2. That's also single threshold. Super easy to cast. Probably going to do some damage, do some work, even if you don't. And even if you don't illuminate, and then also it's your opponent has to deal with it, so it's also might eat a big removal spell. So our curve's pretty low. For this deck to really go off, we need like more of these guys, and some of the well, cool. Or his buddy, Deathless Agent. That's pretty good. We got Infiltrators and Agents. I'm going to actually take this over the other Firepower. The Firepower could wheel just because of how open-ish Ruby is, though. I don't suggest passing removal if you're new. Because basically you just need to answer your opponent's stuff. This is semi-conditional removal, but in my experience it has plenty of targets to be justified. And against your opponent's bomb, sometimes you 2-for-1 yourself, but it's not the end of the world if that means you're going to win the game, So, but I'm going to take this Agent mainly because it's aggressive. We want to be on the aggressive side. We want to get those Fate Weaves, and we want to be doing a lot of damage pretty quick. So our curve's low. We don't. Okay, so Deathless Agent or Runic Fury. Runic Fury is really good at finishing games quick. I will say probably another Deathless Agent's the better plan, though. Playing a bunch of these and no Fate Weave is a lot worse than knowing that you have a couple of these in your deck. So I'm a little hesitant to pass a Runic Fury. We have two sources of Fate Weave, or we have two Fate Weave cards that care about Fate Weave, and only like one way to turn it on. It's not great so far. This is going to seem a little questionable to some people, but I'm going to take the Runic because I think this deck actually just wants crush damage, and it wants that huge attack buff. And it wants to be able to play it twice. Like, that's a pretty big swing. In this pack, we would love this guy due to its synergies with our deck. There's not a lot right now, but if we play the Chant Power, we'll have some candles floating around. We got this card. Though we could probably pick these up in the next pack, whereas this being uncommon, this guy's a house. I don't know if you guys really... It's probably undervalued. The fact that it can buff something the turn it enters play and buff something when it dies, and it's always trading for pretty good value. It's hard to pass up. It's a great way to finish a game. And our 2-drop spot is a little saturated, though. That 2-drop would have been fine. The 1/3 that makes a candle certainly would have been fine in a deck like this. We're not like OP candles yet either, which is we're more kind of just an aggressive deck. So we're gonna need something. This could be okay in the sideboard if our opponent has a bunch of X1 troops. This card's cool. Don't get me wrong. I found it to be a little inconsistent. I mean, it should be inconsistent because you're playing a 2/3 for 4 that gets like a free combat trick, maybe. So it does win games because you can just kind of hold it and set up a board state and all that kind of stuff. So for that reason, I guess I'm going to pick it. We may, if we can get away with playing it, it's going to be good. This guy's just a little, his base stats are a little too poor, and we're not really making a whole lot of constants. So I'm okay with picking this guy. We're looking for more of these. So this is another Illuminate Travel, though it's slow. So I can already tell by my curve I don't want the game to go very long. So I want more of these. I want more of these. I want some more of these would be okay. I want to be pushing through damage. Either getting ahead, staying ahead, or gaining tempo back in the early game. This card's okay in candles just because you're often playing a lot of tricks and things and sorceries and spells. But I'm pretty happy to have 2 of those. We'll take the Emulate. We do need this card. We also want the Fate Weave, but just having an ability to stop our opponent's best card, best troop, is pretty useful. That's something this deck doesn't have necessarily with Rune Blast. But there aren't a whole lot of like 6/6s floating around, but there are ways to make things bigger. So just having access to one of these cards is great. We're giving up an ice, which is kind of a bummer. Alright, so now we're playing, we have 3 Fate Weave, cares about Fate Weave cards. This is an interesting question. So I think it's easier to go in on Fate Weave than go in on tricks. Because we might not get the tricks that we want. I say tricks because this guy is pretty gross once you really get some actions going. But we can go ahead and, prioritize Fate Weave now in the next pack. And probably land somewhere decent. Shard Call in case we want to splash. This card's pretty unplayable. I guess having 2 of these is okay. We could also, if we get super Fate Weave, we could splash and buff our board, though. That sounds like a little bit of a clumsy strategy in an aggressive deck, so... This card's okay for opponent's removal light. It often will just seal the game pretty quick. Though I think there might be some games where we play 2 of these. I'm not really thinking about main decking 1, but... So this is... We could just socket this up for Fate Weave. I think there's better options. So I'm not necessarily jumping this guy. If it was pack 3, I'd probably pick him up, but... This card's decent because, like I said, we want to keep attacking. So in a very aggressively minded deck, that effect's pretty good. Take a Runic Missile, probably play it in the sideboard. We could, yeah. As of right now, this deck's very aggressive, and I might even cut this because it's just a 2/2 on turn 3. Yeah, so we got all the missiles. It's probably better than a resource. Though there are some cards we want to splash in Sapphire. 3 runic missiles. So I mean it doesn't really have any synergies in our deck. And a Spells Matter Shell, those cards are pretty good. Though that deck isn't very popular. It's a little inconsistent. Though it can be good. Yeah, this card's worth about $2. And it cares about Void. Or it cares about Mill. If this was like a competitive event, I would just take a Frost Blast. But the fact that this is just your everyday draft, I do like to take cards that are worth money, as long as I'm not giving up anything too insane. And one Frost Blast isn't really insane, and Frost Blast isn't really that great in an aggressive deck, mainly because you have to hold up the resources, and your opponent can play around it. Though it's certainly good. It has Fate Weave. But we're just going to rare draft. Now we probably want Candle. We probably just want the Candle. This card is okay as a finisher in the air, but some games it's not going to be good enough. But we could have had a pretty decent Wild deck. And honestly, I feel a little better being in Wild. Mainly because of Furuko. Sometimes when you just have troops, just knowing that your Furuko is pretty good. But this is a solid 2-drop for our deck. So we have a lot of power around the 2 slot. So we're gonna have some gassy hands. Now we just kind of gotta make sure that we need Fate Weave triggers. So we might actually even play the Fate Weave guy, though. That seems pretty sad. Because we got 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 sources of making candles, and only 1 source of Fate Weave. So we got some pretty big tension. I'm just going to pick the removal, because it's by far the best card in this pack. This gives you, kills anything, it voids it, which is relevant, and gains you health. That's pretty good. Though I'm getting a little nervous about this deck. So yeah, our curve's good. How are we winning the game? So we're gonna have to guess. We're gonna have to get rid of blockers through removal, and which we have a decent amount. We could also oftentimes play this for 2, which is pretty good. But we're gonna take the 3-drop, and we're gonna keep our eyes out for tricks. I don't want to play these guys, but maybe just being super all-in aggro is decent. I'm a little worried about our lack of Fate Weave, which is my primary concern. It is confusing. So I would love another one of these guys, but I think for the deck we just want another Runic Fury. I think it's going to do more work. It's going to win us the game more often than this guy is, because we are going to get to a point where our opponent's going to play bigger stuff than us, and we just need a way to end the game. This could also wheel if Ruby's that open, and we will play 2 in our deck, though we might have to do some adjustments because we don't want our curve to be too high. I'd also love a 3rd one of these, but I've been thoroughly impressed with this card. And my guess is something will wheel from that pack that we can play. So maybe we just cut the Fate Weave plan, because we only have two ways to turn that on, which is really awkward. Normally you get like a billion. I don't want to start just playing these cards for Fate Weave. Does this go to face? I forget. No, it's opposing troop. If it went to face, we'd play like 6 of them. The fact that it doesn't, I think 2 is probably the most we want to play, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sources of removal, and we just kind of want to capitalize on the turns that we just curve out and win. I think our deck didn't get enough Fate Weave to really go all in on these guys. I mean, taking a third here isn't necessarily good. We may want 2 of these just to start get that 1-drop pressure, and yeah, we can give it Gladiator. I think we can give it Gladiator. So a 2-1 for 1's decent. We could also give it Fate Weave, which is not a horrible play in your opening hand. We already have one of these. I don't know. This is a weird pack. So don't really have. We could give this guy Fate Weave. We're not gonna have Constants, so a 2/2 flyer for 3. I don't know if it's good enough. We only have one way to make Constants, I think. I don't know. We're gonna have to do some adjustments. Maybe we just play this guy. Just be more all in on the aggro. It's a 4-drop. He's a good blocker, good attacker. I like this card. I mean, we might really want the Fate Weave. But I think I'm going to have to actually... I mean, for the fact that we've seen like 6 of these, and that we don't have sources for Fate Weave is a little surprising. We may want this guy just to come in and Fate Weave for us. I don't want to like go all in on these because we may actually end up just cutting some. Alright, we got this guy. I think he does more what we want to do than a 3/4 flyer for 5. Not because I think a 3/4 flyer for 5 is better, but this guy, we want to play this to maintain tempo and force our opponent to respawn while we're swinging for a lot of damage. So that's kind of a good card in that respect. We may just give up on Fate Weave. We have a very powerful early game deck. I'm not super thrilled. So we might even actually have to play a new champion too. We'll see. We don't need to splash anything. Hitting a card's kind of bad. Maybe we just pick the treat machine. It's a weird pick. This card's fine. If we're just gonna go for like dump our hand and win the game by turn 5, a card like this is pretty good. It was that or play the Fate Weave enabler that we're probably not gonna pick because I think trying to synergize with these guys too much is actually gonna kind of split our deck apart too much, mainly because we don't have incidental sources of Fate Weave. I'll definitely take 4 of these guys. So this is a deck where really we just want like 5 of these. 5 Runic Furies, win off the backs of these guys, turns 4, 5, and 6, Card probably gives us more trouble than anything else. Got some cuts. So we certainly, we just built the aggressive deck, We're not super candles, though. That's a secondary synergy. We're not, never know. We're not super gladiator, though we ended up, a decent amount of gladiator. We're not, we're not any one thing, any archetype particularly well outside of just an aggro deck, but we got a pretty good grip of aggressive cards, and we definitely have some ways to interact with our opponent's stuff. So I really can't complain about this deck. So we want to play one of these. That's an auto include. We're probably going to play 2 of these guys versus 2 of these guys. This card just, when you need a blocker, it's too expensive and too understated. And when you're ahead, I do know it can seal games where otherwise you couldn't because of speed. So as like a finisher kind of reach play, it's pretty good. But so we'll keep our eye on that. We want to play 4 of these because it's pretty much always good, and they are good. Swift Strike's good in multiples, you know. We know we want to play 2 of these. We know we want to play this guy. We know we want to play this. I think I actually want to main deck one of these. I think this is... So what this does is it copies a troop. That's actually better. I don't play with this card very often. So this actually just copies a troop. So that's great. It can be our opponent's best thing. It doesn't steal it, which is... So it doesn't displace a blocker. But, you know, it will trigger Enter the Battlefield effects, I think. So it will trigger deploy effects. So that could be a big gang. And also, you know, imagine doubling up on one of these guys. Now you're swinging for 12 points of crush damage. You know, it's pretty good. So out of our Ruby cards, we want to play 2 of these. All right. Okay. I'm going to have a little more trouble figuring out what to do here. So we definitely want to play this guy because even if we didn't play candles, being able to get a 1-1 that has some synergies and a 1-3 for 2 is a good deal. It's for 3 total, even for 3. If that was all... I mean, you have the option. You can do it in installment, so it's more efficient. But even if you had to do it, if it could just cost 3 and you got the candle or the illuminate 1, I'd be super stoked with that card. So this card's great, and I have lost to just opponent playing like 6 of these. So we definitely want to play Infiltrator because he has an Enter the Battlefield effect. I don't know how like going off we're gonna be able to go with this guy, but even a 2/4 for 3 that lets us Fate Weave once is pretty good, and as a 4/4 on defense is not bad. We definitely want to play these because if we do end up in a long grindy game, that Illuminate's going to be pretty important, and the fact that it flies and it only costs 2 means it's going to do some work in most games. This card for value, there's a lot of like one cost random constants that help these kind of strategies. So removal. What's our troop count up to? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we have 15 troops. That's including the candle procs. Doesn't feel like enough troops. So maybe we take this out. We definitely don't want to play this card because it just creates a blocker in the main deck if we can avoid it. And I think we can because we have 2 Rune Blasts and a Firepower and a Flame Lick. So that's a possible cut. We want to play this guy mainly because he'll most likely allow us to push through some extra damage. I just don't think we got there on Fate Weave. So normally we would just jam these guys and be super happy, but like playing 3, changing my deck around to play more of these, and then my only source of Fate Weave being a champion power seems pretty bad. So how many candles can we make? 1, 2. We'll count these as like 1.5 candles. This is going to be a lot of games where we can't. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. Alright. So do we care if this Fate Weaves? What would we rather give this guy? We can make him a 2/6. We can give him Swift Strike. None of the ices came around. So we need to be as aggressive as possible. I'm not sure if we're doing that with this deck. This is really nice, and these are really nice. This is really nice. These are really nice. That's really nice. These are very proactive. So yeah, I guess we're pretty aggressive. That helps. This just has 3 power and with value. I'm trying to figure out what's our... Maybe we do end up playing one of these. Just leaning on that card to push through a bunch of damage. And then... this having Swift Strike is probably better, since we're not really going with Fate Weave. Though 2/4, I still like the blocking plan. I still just like Fate Weaving, so we might want that card just for card selection. But I can't believe we don't have any other incidental sources of Fate Weave. It's pretty frustrating. See what we have in artifacts. Would we play this card just to Fate Weave? No. Not worth it. You know, we can bring this in for against other aggro decks. If we think a flyer is just a 2/2 flyer for 3 is good enough, we'll play this guy's. I mean, for the record, a 2/2 flyer for 3 is good enough, but so maybe I cut something. Like this is probably going to do more damage in your average game than this. Though the surprise factor is pretty legit. We could... Yeah, we only have one way to make this a 3/3. I think we're going to have to do this on the ground. And like we want our 3 drops to... Well, maybe this card just isn't good enough. Is it possible to not main deck this guy? I don't think so. I don't think so. If we were to make a cut, we could give this Fate Weave, I guess. That's an okay deal. It would give us some, you know, a little extra synergy. Though, I do want to play this for its evasive ability. So... we don't really have a strong cut. I think we're pretty much going with this plan over an additional, like, on a flyer. That would probably be the cut, and I think this is going to be good enough most of the time to warrant its inclusion. So let's think about champions here. We don't want to just Fate Weave the Fate Weave because one card, and we don't want to add the extra 2 because just one champion shot at it per game isn't quite enough to warrant. Whereas this makes troops and gets better the more candles we have. It's probably going to be a Cassandra, though a spammy board could benefit from Tork. Yeah, we could easily go Tork, actually. This card's pretty sweet. It is actually what we want to do. This would give us an extra thump on turn 6 that we don't really have. I think it's way better than Swamp Butt, because Swamp Butt, we're not necessarily going to see those cards. And they're not necessarily going to be good. I mean, yes, actually drawing a card and doing 1 damage for free is good, but I'm actually thinking Tharka's a little better than Tork. Because even if we do end up having to trade our stuff, this is something our opponent's going to have to play around the whole game and might not actually be able to. So basically, being able to push through 6 more damage is probably going to be more relevant than this on turn 4. Though that's I don't know. It's hard because we have so many Swift Strikers. So these swinging in for 4 is going to be so powerful on turn 4. Maybe it is actually just Tork. I think it's Tork. This deck isn't necessarily going to be getting into 6 a lot. We want to settle these games relatively quickly. I think this is going to help us do that better than... and being able to buff something makes it slightly better pre-combat. Though I guess it kind of cancels it out. Anyway, we're going to try this. I think this is a decent deck. We're going to add our shards, and maybe I'll post the results or post the games themselves. But hopefully this helps. I know that it's not like the best overview of like this is how you draft and all that, but hopefully there's enough contextual knowledge to where you can kind of see principles at work. That's what helps me learn, and those are the videos I like watching, so naturally that's what I make. So anyway, if you enjoyed it, please leave a comment or like or whatever, and thanks so much for watching.